And good morning. I'm Ernesto Garcia, and this is Let's Talk Las Cruces, a division of Mesilla Valley News. Soon we'll be speaking with Lieutenant Governor Howie Morales, but first I want to remind everybody that this segment is brought to you by our friends over at American Document Services, 300A North 17th Street in Las Cruces. Make sure to stop on by. See Rick Jackson and his crew. They are taking care of your information and making sure that they scan, shred, and store for you as well. When it comes to document scanning, document storage, medical scanning as well, as long as paperless office conversion, you can save time, money, and preserve natural resources, all at American Document Services, ADSLCNM.com. As always, when we get a chance to speak with the Lieutenant Governor, we don't mind if people ask questions. We prefer questions, not comments. I will not put any of the comments for the Lieutenant Governor to see until after the interview is completed if he chooses to see them. But if there is a question for the Lieutenant Governor talking about any of the subjects that we're talking about on Let's Talk Las Cruces, for those of you watching live on Facebook on this January 13th at around 11 o'clock, please do so and submit your comments and the questions below, either through Twitter, through YouTube now, and through Facebook as well. So following all these platforms, we're getting a chance to speak with the man who's been doing a lot of Zooming lately, and that is Lieutenant Governor Howie Morales. It's great to see you, sir, and it's time now for the state legislature, and education is the first priority on your mind.
Absolutely. So good to see you, Ernesto. Thank you for making time for me today to share upcoming preview of what's going to take place within this next legislative session. I was hoping that we will be able to be in person and to do more of these interviews in person by now, but obviously the whole country and the whole world has been impacted once again by the new variant. And I just want to urge everyone and encourage everyone to continue to stay safe and continue to take care of one another. But it's always good to be here, whether virtually or in person, Ernesto, with your listening audience.
All right, and I appreciate that. And just so we are at full disclosure, I recently came down with COVID. I have been cleared since then, but I'm still following all protocols and want to make sure that we are safe, and that should be clear to go back by Monday. So now as we speak with the Lieutenant Governor, let's talk about what Governor Lujan Grisham is proposing and what you're hoping to get through in the state legislature, which is about education, looking at increasing raises for everyone from the janitor to every teacher that is in New Mexico. In other words, to be as competitive as possible, trying to see if we can get the minimum salary over to $50,000. How does that happen, and how are the procedures of that work, and how would it play about?
Yeah, I've always said that everything begins and ends with education, and me personally, having a background in education, this is especially meaningful because when we came in 2019, before the pandemic was even a thought, we made education our priority, almost infusing nearly $500 million into our education system. Along with that, we knew that we had some issues that we were dealing with, like educator vacancies. And when I talk about educators, I'm not just talking about teachers. I'm talking about, just as you said, all those that work in the school environment, whether it's the custodian, the bus drivers, those school psychologists, the counselors, the administrators, the teachers, the coaches. If you have an impact in that child's life, you're an educator. And so when we look and see how we can better prepare our educators to be in the workforce and assist our students, which ultimately, that's the reason why we go into education, it's important that we make it competitive. And that's exactly what the governor has done. Early on in our first year, we did have a raise in compensation. We did that the second year that we were in. And last year, obviously, there was some issues and concerns of where we were going to be with the economy. But this year, the governor coming in, asking for a 7% increase and increasing those those new teacher levels as well. And this is extremely important. Your second level and your third level educators, who are your veterans, who have been there, who have stayed with the system, that they also see a bump in pay, because we want to make sure that we're not only competitive, but we're doing as much as we can to value and show the value to all our educators across the state of New Mexico. And I believe that the legislature will work with us this next session to make sure that we can do that.
The estimated cost, according to the article that came out in the Albuquerque Journal, ranged at anywhere from $250 to $300 million. Where does this money come from? How does we get this money for the state legislature?
Yeah, and I always like to look at it. I sat on finance committee for many years when I was in the Senate, and I would look at things not as expenditures, but rather as investments. And that's what this is. This is an investment in our educators, in our school systems. Right now, what's happening all across the country, and New Mexico is no exception, is the educator vacancy. When we see the amount of educators who are not in the classroom, who have left, who have retired, who chose not to go into the profession, we have a crisis on our hands. So fortunately in New Mexico, we've been able to see that with our reserves. Financially, we seem to be pretty strong. We're at 36% reserves, which is amazing considering that we've been going through a pandemic. But we want to make sure that we also recognize that because of oil and gas and because of the production that we've seen there, New Mexico has a lot of what's called new monies that can be reinvested. No better way to reinvest money than to reinvest it into education, into students. And this is exactly where this is going to go towards. Again, I look at the price tag as more an investment rather than an expenditure.
All right, speaking with Lieutenant Governor Howie Morales, talking about the upcoming state legislature and the possible education raises that are proposed on here to pay everyone from the janitor to the teachers, as Howie has expressed here. I want to bring up a couple of points here from school districts wise, as obviously as we take Texas, a neighboring state, looking competitive wise. If this proposal goes through, we would be paying teachers higher than what we're paying in Texas. And do you feel that that would draw more people from the state of Texas to come to New Mexico? And also, do you feel that this would give a chance for retired teachers also the boost that they would need to come back into the education force?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's unfortunate that we have to have states who are competing for a pool of professionals, but that's the reality of it, of what we're doing. So in conjunction, not only with the compensation piece, with the raises that are being proposed, it's also important to recognize what else is needed for educators. Support is needed to make sure that they have that support within their own school building, to make sure that you take away a lot of those bureaucratic approaches that oftentimes take away from the daily instruction and the attention that's needed to our students. So that's one area that we're looking, hopefully, to be able to be of more support for educators. We also want to look and see, and I know personally, had I stayed in education when I came in, I'd be retiring this year. But all those that did stay in the classroom that I started with, there was 8 of them in total. They're retiring this year. They're getting set to enjoy the retirement piece. They're not ready to stop working, but they're at that level where they want to make sure that they can do that. Them and many others across the state are experiencing the same thing. So we have to look at it from a realistic point of view. How can we be creative to make sure that we're making a incentivize for people, if they do retire, to get right back into the classroom as soon as possible? I think that there's some approaches that can be done, and I'm going to continue to advocate and find ways. So all those educators across the state, my good friend David Reyes, who was a coach there at Oneonta High School for many years, who has advocated for that. Others around the communities that have advocated to try to make sure we can shorten the amount of time educators have to sit out so they can get back into the classroom and do what they love to do, and that's educating students.
Speaking of Lieutenant Governor Howie Morales, got to ask, one of the biggest things that's been affecting a lot of the teacher shortage that's going across the nation is concerns over the pandemic. I mean, here we are doing an interview, and obviously we still have to be very cautious. Teachers, some have refused to go back because of the scary part of dealing with COVID, and students' part. Is there money in this bill that would also put increased money for PPE procedures and COVID protocol procedures to help out?
Yeah, again, Ernesto, we would hope that we were beyond this. And unfortunately, we see that the rise of cases are continually bringing concern. The difference that I see right now than where we were a year ago is that we didn't have the vaccine at the percentage that we have now. So the amount of people who are vaccinated and boosted really does help, but it doesn't take away the concern. I'm personally concerned going into the legislative session on Tuesday. I have young kids still, and I want to make sure that I'm doing all I can to be as protective for them and for my family as educators are. It's not that educators don't want to be in the classroom. They want to be in the classroom. They'd rather be in the classroom, but they want to make sure that they're safe as well as those students. Just today, President Biden announced a more aggressive approach to assisting and working with states. So more PPE that'll be sent out in the states is going to be effective. And so we'll see that coming into New Mexico and to our schools. But also, we also saw with President Biden's announcement today that we're going to have National Guardsmen and women come into our area to assist us. We only have 1,000 hospital beds in the state. So we're a little bit different than other states. So it's great that we're going to have that added support, because our hospital systems are really struggling right now, more now than I've ever seen.
Well, I'm going to go back to the topic of education in a second, but since you brought up the president and what the announcement was today with these National Guard members, what is the latest that the state has received? How dangerous are we to not having hospital beds? I can say that the last example, I know somebody who, thankfully enough, they were able to have enough oxygen in them and they didn't need a bed, but they were concerned that they didn't have a bed for them at one of our area hospitals in Las Cruces. What are you hearing from all over the state? And are we at critical parts where we don't have enough beds to cover?
Even when we were in the pandemic without the vaccine, I looked very closely at the hospital bed situation because that gave me an indication of where we're at. Right now, the last number I saw, we were around 500 hospital beds that are occupied by COVID patients. Again, when you have 500 of those beds that are occupied, those are 500 beds that are not available for people who have had a heart attack, a stroke, who are delivering a baby, and other medical needed services that had to be provided. So that's what concerns me. We did get up to over 900 beds occupied by COVID patients last December. I'm watching that closely and I'm concerned because, again, it's not just those that are being treated, primarily, mainly those that are being treated are unvaccinated. It's also impacting those that are vaccinated who don't need to necessarily be in the hospital for COVID, but may have other ailments that they need direct attention to.
Okay, and how long do you think these National Guardsmen will be sticking around in the state? And do you think it's only for a short time, or are you hoping, or is that what you and the governor want to learn more about?
We're always welcoming the added support. So I want to, grateful the work that our federal delegation has done and the president to make sure to prioritize New Mexico. We're hoping that it is a short time, just because that means that we're turning the corner on COVID and the Omicron variant. But nonetheless, that support is absolutely needed. We need to give relief, especially to those that are in the facilities, those nurses, those assistants, those physicians, those physician assistants that are all in there and feeling the brunt of this. This is going to be some much needed relief for them.
Lieutenant Governor, I had to ask, there's some folks that are saying, how come there is no pauses or any delays? For example, at least in some school districts, they have decided to go remote, like in Santa Fe part as such. Do you feel that there will be delays, or do you think it needs to be on a case-by-case basis?
Yeah, and that's something that was asked when we came into this. We didn't know what we were going to go into. We didn't know what this virus is going to look like, so we had to take direct action as a state. We had to make sure that everyone was operating the way that we felt would be consistent. We know a lot more about this virus now, and we also know that there's been a lot of research that's been done at the district level. Because of that, then the districts, all should have their say in this as well, and what they feel is important for their areas of the state. There's some schools who have put a week pause. There's some that have put maybe a 2-day pause. And there's others that maybe have put further restrictions on sporting events. Those are district level decisions that are being made. And I think it's always important that we recognize that local autonomy.
All right. Speaking of Lieutenant Governor Howie Morales, I want to bring up the website here so people can see, and we want to talk about the state legislature. Obviously, there are new rules in the state legislature. You have to be vaccinated to be a part of this. What happens if a senator or representative is not vaccinated? What's going to be the procedure then? Will they be able to participate through Zoom or anything such?
So we did the special session dealing with redistricting, and the mandate was that you had to have a vaccine to be in there. We didn't see many issues with that. However, I do have to point out that if you're a senator or representative, you don't have to be vaccinated. So that was part of the rules that was passed in the legislature, which sometimes we get a lot of question with that, but it didn't seem to be much of an issue. I'm imagining that a majority, if not all of them, may be vaccinated, but as far as the public to be in attendance, there needs to be vaccination to be part of that. We are changing some of our rules though, because we're seeing every day that legislators are coming down with the COVID. There's a rule that you can participate in committees virtually, but you can't participate in the floor votes unless you're there in the Capitol. Well, if you have COVID, as we've seen in the special session, you can't be in the Capitol. You have to be at home. You have to make sure you're isolated. I think some of the rules will reflect that if you have COVID, you're able to participate virtually from home, isolated, more importantly, to be a voice, to cast a vote for those constituents who are depending on you to do that.
All right, speaking of Lieutenant Governor Howie Morales, I have a few more questions to bring up. This is going back to the education part. I want to bring up an example that happened here in Las Cruces. There was a chance that we were going to be without bus services for a while because the public schools and the bus services were having the bus service was having a debate with its drivers talking about financials, and obviously those bus drivers wanted raises. On this new proposal, will this help out with contracts that the public schools have, and will it include an increase for contracts as well? So therefore more bus drivers can be driving under different salaries?
Yeah, so I'm a huge supporter. I know many of them personally, those drivers that get our students to and from school in the Las Cruces public schools, and I want to thank them for all the work that they do. I also want to just give special credit to Superintendent Ralph Ramos and Dr. Tim Hand, who stayed in communication with me, giving me updates, sharing what the plans were if the strike would have continued much longer. Fortunately, they were able to come together and have an agreement there. It is a contract that's done, so it's a little different than other districts where they work directly with the district. This is a contractor that works with the employees. But again, as I think that there's going to be a focus of how we can best take care of all those within the education system, and how those contracts will look. That's going to be according to the districts and what it is, the funding that they're seeking. But I have every bit of confidence in the world in the administration that's there at Las Cruces Public Schools to make sure that they're doing all they can to take care of our students and our bus drivers.
Knowing that this is affecting the entire state, it doesn't seem like anybody is saying no to raises. How is it going to be working among party lines? And do you think there'll be some provisions that might be negotiated between both Republicans and Democrats in the Senate? And are you hoping that you can broker those agreements?
Yeah, there always are agreements. I mean, that's politics. Politics is the art of compromise. How can we have an idea, and how can we find some compromise that best work for the people of the state? And I think that there's a recognition across party lines, whether you're Democrat, Republican, independent, declining state, education is a priority. And I don't see too many debate about this. But what I do see is some opportunities of how we can better support our educators, because our educators deserve to have a fair raise, to a fair compensation. Our educators deserve to have safe living conditions. Our educators deserve to have an opportunity to have a wage where they don't have to work two jobs. That's the hope that we can have. So that way, all focus is put on the students, on the curriculum, and delivering that in a meaningful lesson plan way.
All right. Want to bring up a couple of other things with the state legislature. Obviously, crime today in Albuquerque. There was 3 shootings in that area just in the 24-hour span. Obviously, there's a lot of people wondering what's the state going to do to get more competitive with police officers and such. Las Cruces Mayor Ken Miyagashima says he's looking at the city to try to be more competitive as well. Is there money in the state legislature in those reserves for police in the area?
Yeah, so I don't think we need to necessarily tap into the reserves. I think the reserves are there because of the volatility of oil and gas. Those prices could change all the time, but there is a priority to make sure that we can use some of those new monies to help in this area. Just as we speak right now, the governor is having a press conference in Albuquerque with the chief of police, the district attorney, the attorney general, and unveiling the crime package of what can be done to best address crime across our state. I want to make sure that we point out, because we want to have, same as I talked about educators, to get our law enforcement officers back in after they've retired, we have to have an honest dialogue of how we can make them available to come back into work. They want to work, but the system doesn't allow for that. How can we do that where they can get in there, get back and serving the public the way that they are accustomed to? I think that needs to be part of the discussion. What we also have to have is to make sure that we recognize that in fighting crime, we can't just expect to fight crime. Yes, we need to make sure that those violent offenders are put in jail, but we also have to recognize that there's another approach that can be done. What are some of the root causes that are causing some of this crime? Substance abuse. Is it other issues that are being dealt with across our society? Those are the things that we have to look at and seeing how can we bolster up, while supporting our law enforcement, how can we bolster up more services of counseling, more services of to eliminate some of the homelessness, more services that can help to get treatment where it's necessary. It can't be just a one approach that we're going to put everybody in jail and be done with it. No, we have to make sure that we look at the root causes, and I believe we'll do that this session.
And just a couple more questions, Lieutenant Governor Howie Morales. I know your time is very important, so we're going to try to get through these as best as we can. A national story that came out yesterday was talking about inflation being up 7%. Obviously, it's affecting everyone at gas stations, grocery stores, and just living on budget from paycheck to paycheck. What are some of the things that the state is looking at to help out, knowing that this is going to be a pretty tough time, and there is no sign, according to the White House, that the inflation is going to stop anytime soon?
Yeah, it's impacting us, every one of us. I sometimes see the double-edged sword when you look, for example, on gas prices. The gas prices are higher. When the gas prices are higher, that means that there's also more dollars available for raises, for law enforcement, for educators, for more programming that can be done, but you're paying more at the pump. And so that's kind of the double-edged sword. I would always also hear when the prices of gas were really low, people were happy at the pump, but I also saw that there was many cuts that had to take place to balance our state budget. So that's a challenge right there. So I think that when we look and see how we can best approach that and dealing with inflation, obviously looking at different approaches that can have some tax cutting measures, I think that's key. And the governor is going to continue to advocate for middle class New Mexico to benefit from that. But I also think that we have to reduce our reliance on just certain areas of revenue generators for the state. We live off of the revenues and the high points of oil and gas. It was the same way for me here in Grant County. When the copper prices were down, the community really struggled. When the copper prices were up, the community did well. How can we better diversify more revenue streams coming in so we don't have the peaks and valleys? And that's what I'm hoping, that there'll be the investment, that we finally have those dollars to invest in infrastructure to help us in many areas. And I look forward to the 30 days. It's going to be a jam-packed 30-day session. Again, I'm very concerned that we're doing it in person. I don't think we should be doing it in person. I think it should be done virtually to begin with. But nonetheless, we're there to work for the people of the state of New Mexico, and I'll be there to make sure that the business in the Senate is carried forward.
All right. We did get a couple of questions from a couple of listeners, one dealing with water concerns, knowing that normal levels of water might be very scarce. How worried are we about the state, knowing that we have a very dry winter so far, and Colorado didn't get a lot of snow up there either as well? Are there concerns among the state and you and the governor about water issues?
Yeah, there's always concerns. Going back to 2012, when I was really getting my feet under me as a state senator, there were the concerns that we would see there, and a lot of technology efforts to help us along those ways. New Mexico State is a leader in trying to figure out ways to better conserve our water, to do what we can to make sure that we're adding to more of the supply with clean water across our state. We do have a 50-year water plan, which I think was very bold of the governor to work towards. And so that you'll get more information on that. But absolutely, especially when we live in the communities where farming and ranching is so important to our state, we have to make sure that we're doing all we can to protect our water sources.
All right. And the last question coming up, how likely will these pay increases for educators be? How long do you think it'll take to go through the process and for teachers to start seeing raises and these competitive prices to be advertised to try to get more teachers?
Yeah, so I do see it. Again, I want to remind educators, and this was especially important to me and the governor, is that this will be the third time in the 4 years that we've been in office that educators will get a raise. I think that's important because we want to make sure that we recognize that it's just not a one-time thing. We want to make sure that we're valuing them. So I do see it being part of the budget process. I saw the Legislative Finance Committee proposal had it in their budget. Our executive proposal had it in our budget. So that right there is, to me, 75% of the battle, even before the session has started. That would come in effect July 1st when the new budget starts. And so I do see that taking place. But I also want to advocate also not to forget about the importance of those social workers, not to forget about the importance of other service providers across our state, and recognizing ways that we can help them as well.
All righty. This segment is always brought to you by our friends over at American Document Services, 300A North 17th Street in Las Cruces. Save time, save money, preserve those national resources, adslcnm.com. We look forward to talking to you again sometime in the state legislature. We did it before, so next time we're ready to see you there again, Howie. If you get a chance, we'll do another interview with you there in the state legislature. You can keep us up to date on what's going on.
Look, happy to do it, even if it's on a weekly basis. I think it's important that the public is always involved in what's happening there. But I also want to make sure that the public is aware that you can participate from anywhere across the state in New Mexico. nmlegis.gov will get you in any committee hearing room. And this is important, especially when we live 4 and 5 hours away from Santa Fe. You can have that access, and you can even give public comment from your home. I would ask people to take advantage of that.
And there it is, the website, so people understand this is the website. Am I correct? That'll get you everywhere you need to go.
That's it right there.
All right. Well, we just want to make sure you do it. Well, I know that I didn't get a chance to wish you Happy New Year. So Happy New Year, Lieutenant Governor. We hope to talk to you very soon again. And thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ernesto.
This has been Let's Talk Las Cruces, a division of